I'm Emma, 34, a tech entrepreneur who built everything from nothing. Growing up, I was always second best to my sister Ashley in my parents' eyes. Nothing I did was ever enough. What I never expected was that after years of choosing her over me, my parents would take me to court when I finally succeeded on my own. The betrayal cut deeper than any childhood slight ever could. Before I share how my own parents took me to court, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt like the forgotten child in your family. I grew up in a modest 3-bedroom house in Lexington, Massachusetts, a middle-class suburb just outside Boston. Our neighborhood was the kind where people maintained perfect lawns and compared their children's achievements over backyard fences. My father, Michael, was an accountant at a prestigious firm downtown, always stern, always calculating, even at home. My mother, Rebecca, worked as an administrator at the local high school, a perfectionist who scrutinized every detail of our lives against her vision of ideal family. Then there was my sister Ashley, 3 years older than me and seemingly perfect, in every way that mattered to my parents. She had glossy brown hair that fell in natural waves, unlike my unruly curls that my mother constantly tried to tame. Ashley's bedroom walls were lined with trophies, ribbons, and certificates that my parents proudly showcased to every visitor. The comparison between us started early. When I was 5 and Ashley 8, my parents would invite their friends over for dinner and ask Ashley to perform piano pieces she'd learned while I was told to sit quietly and not interrupt. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood, played on repeat through different variations. Ashley studies without being asked. Ashley never argues. Ashley knows how to behave in public. While Ashley excelled in traditional academics and performing arts, I found myself drawn to computers and technology. My father brought home an old desktop computer when I was 7, and I became fascinated with how it worked. I'd spend hours figuring out programs and even started teaching myself basic coding from library books. But my parents saw this as wasting time playing on computers while celebrating Ashley's every achievement, her straight A's, her lead role in the school play, her first-place science fair project. Christmas mornings in our house told the whole story. The year I was 9, Ashley received an expensive violin because she'd expressed interest in joining the orchestra. I received a diary and coloured pencils. When I unwrapped my gifts with obvious disappointment, my mother said, "We didn't think you needed anything special this year." That night, I wrote in my new diary about how I wished Santa brought computer programming books instead. My 10th birthday fell on the same day as Ashley's regional dance competition. My parents organised a hasty morning celebration before spending the rest of the day at Ashley's event. They invited a few neighbourhood kids over, served store-bought cake, and left my grandmother in charge while they drove Ashley 2 hours away. I blew out candles alone while my parents watched Ashley pirouette on stage. When they returned home late that night with Ashley holding another trophy, they barely asked how my party went. Despite everything, I found ways to nurture my own passions. My grandfather, Thomas, was the only one who saw something special in my interest in computers. He'd been an engineer before retirement and recognised my aptitude for technology. While my parents attended Ashley's debate tournaments, my grandfather would take me to computer stores, explaining hardware components and encouraging my curiosity. On my 12th birthday, after another minimally acknowledged celebration, my grandfather secretly took me to his car where he had hidden a real computer, not a hand-me-down, but a new one with actual programming capabilities. "Don't tell your parents I spent this much," he whispered as we smuggled it into my room. "Some talents need nurturing, even when others don't see them yet." That computer became my sanctuary, my classroom, and my first step toward a future my parents couldn't envision. I developed resilience early, learning to celebrate my own small victories when no one else would. While my parents attended every single one of Ashley's events, I taught myself to be self-sufficient. I learned to cook my own meals when family dinners were rescheduled around Ashley's rehearsals. I figured out how to mend my own clothes when shopping trips were dedicated to finding Ashley's perfect recital outfit. I became invisible in my own home, but that invisibility gave me space to develop independence that would later become my greatest asset. High school intensified the divide between Ashley and me. By 14, I'd developed significant technical skills, but my self-worth continued to plummet. Every day, I walked the halls of Lexington High aware that I lived in the shadow of my sister's legacy. Teachers who had taught Ashley would look at me with disappointment when I didn't share her aptitude for literature or history, though none noticed my advanced capabilities in computer science. Ashley's high school career unfolded like a movie, montage of success, homecoming queen her junior year, class president her senior year, valedictorian with acceptance to Brown University. My parents created a shrine to her achievements, adding newspaper clippings of her community service awards and framed photos from her perfect SAT score celebration to our living room walls. The summer before my junior year, I earned a spot in a prestigious coding camp in New York. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who valued what I could do. I spent 6 glorious weeks learning advanced programming, creating my first substantial application, and making friends who didn't know me as Ashley's little sister. I called home only twice during those weeks, and both times my parents seemed distracted, talking about Ashley's summer internship at a senator's office. When I returned home in August, I found my bedroom door open and the space transformed. My bed was gone, my desk removed, my posters taken down. In their place stood glass display cases filled with Ashley's trophies, ribbons, and photos. My belongings had been packed into cardboard boxes and moved to a damp corner of the basement. "What happened to my room?" I asked, standing in the doorway, with my duffel bag still over my shoulder. My mother barely looked up from arranging a new trophy in the display. "We needed the space for Ashley's achievements. They were taking over the living room. Besides, you're hardly ever home anyway. Where am I supposed to sleep?" My voice cracked despite my efforts to stay calm. "We set up a futon in the basement," my father called from his study. "It's quite comfortable. We tested it." That night, I lay on the thin futon surrounded by storage boxes and the hum of the water heater, plotting my escape. The next day, I walked to the local web design company and asked if they needed help. By some miracle, they hired me part-time to update client websites. At 16, I began building my future, one paid project at a time, saving every dollar, in a bank account my parents knew nothing about. 2 months before Ashley's college graduation, my parents called a family dinner, a rare event since Ashley had left for Brown. I assumed it was to discuss Ashley's graduation plans, but the actual topic blindsided me. "Emma, we need to discuss your college plans," my father began, straightening his silverware unnecessarily. "There's been a change in circumstances." My mother nodded. "Ashley has been accepted to Harvard Law School." "That's great," I said automatically, though I knew what was coming. "The thing is," my father continued, "law school is expensive, and with Ashley's undergraduate loans still being paid off." "You're using my college fund for Ashley's law school," I finished for him. It wasn't a question. The silence confirmed it before my mother's justification. "Ashley has a real shot at a meaningful career, Emma. Her LSAT scores were in the top percentile. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." "And my education isn't?" I asked quietly. My father cleared his throat. "Let's be realistic. You spend all your time on that computer. You're not exactly college material anyway. Ashley will make something of herself." The words hit like physical blows. Not college material. After years of neglect, this explicit statement of their belief in my worthlessness crystallized everything. I excused myself from the table, went to my basement room, and cried silently into my pillow. Then I opened my laptop and applied for 3 more freelance jobs. 2 months later, my grandfather passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack. He was the only person who had ever truly believed in me. At the reading of his will, I learned he'd left me his old Toyota Camry and $5,000 in savings. My parents seemed surprised he'd left me anything at all. The night of my high school graduation, after a celebration that primarily focused on reminiscing. About Ashley's graduation 4 years earlier, I packed everything I owned into my grandfather's car. I left a note on my futon telling my parents not to worry, though I doubted they would. At 18, with $7,243 in my secret bank account, my grandfather's car, and a determination hardened by years of being second best, I drove toward Chicago and didn't look back. Chicago welcomed me with its vastness and anonymity. I found a tiny studio apartment in Rogers Park that cost nearly all my monthly budget. The place was barely 300 square feet, with a kitchenette that consisted of a mini fridge, a hot plate, and a sink that dripped continuously. But it was mine, the first space that truly belonged to me. Reality hit hard during those first months. My savings dwindled faster than expected, and I quickly realised one job wouldn't cover my expenses. I became a morning barista at a local coffee shop, worked retail at an electronics store evenings and weekends, and spent every other available moment building websites for clients I found online. I slept 4 hours a night, existing on coffee and ramen noodles. There were nights I'd sit on my single mattress on the floor, laptop balanced on my knees, coding until my vision blurred. One particularly brutal winter month, when heating costs spiked, I had to choose between electricity and food. I chose electricity so I could keep working, and spent 3 days eating nothing but crackers and peanut butter a customer had left in the break room at the coffee shop. Despite these hardships, I felt freer than I ever had in my parents' house. No one compared me to anyone else. No one dismissed my passion for technology. In my tiny apartment with its water-stained ceiling, I could be fully myself. During late nights of coding, I began developing a software solution for small businesses to streamline their customer management systems. Existing platforms were either too expensive or too complex for mom-and-pop shops. I saw an opportunity to create something accessible and user-friendly that would fill a gap in the market. One morning at the coffee shop, I served a woman named Sophia who was working on her laptop. She asked for the Wi-Fi password, and we struck up a conversation about the poor connectivity. When she mentioned she ran a tech startup, I cautiously shared some ideas about my software project. To my surprise, she asked thoughtful questions and seemed genuinely interested. "You should stop by my office sometime," Sophia said, handing me her business card. "I might be able to offer some guidance." Sophia became the mentor I desperately needed. She had built her company from scratch 10 years earlier and navigated the male-dominated tech industry successfully. Under her guidance, I refined my business plan and software prototype. When I finally gathered the courage to apply for a small business loan, I was rejected by 7 banks before finding one willing to take a chance on a 20-year-old with no college degree. With a $15,000 loan, I rented a tiny desk in a shared office space and officially launched TechSolve. The early days were grueling. My first client found a bug that crashed their entire system during a holiday sale. I stayed up 48 hours, straight fixing it, terrified my business would end before it truly began. My second client backed out after 2 weeks, leaving me scrambling to cover expenses. Every few months I'd receive brief calls from my parents. They never asked about my business or my life in Chicago. Instead, they'd fill me in on Ashley's law school accomplishments or their own activities, then invariably ask, "Have you spoken to your sister lately?" When Ashley got engaged to a fellow law student from a wealthy Boston family, my mother called specifically to tell me about the ring, 3 carats, Emma, can you imagine, and the planned vineyard wedding. I attended the wedding, flying to Massachusetts using nearly all my profit from a recent project. At the reception, I sat at a table with distant cousins who asked if I was one of the groom's relatives. My own parents introduced me to their friends simply as our younger daughter, without mentioning my business or life in Chicago. I left, early, flew back, and threw myself into work with renewed determination. Each setback and disappointment fueled my drive. When a potential investor laughed at my presentation, telling me to get a real education first, I stayed up all night, improving my pitch. When a male competitor tried to intimidate me at a networking event, suggesting I was too young and inexperienced to succeed, I landed 2 of his clients the following week. The hardships of my childhood had prepared me perfectly for the rejection and challenges of entrepreneurship. I already knew how to function without approval or support. 5 years of relentless work began to pay off. At 23, I launched a new version of my software that caught the attention of industry blogs. TechSolve had grown from just me to a team of 5, working from a small office in Chicago's West Loop. I had moved from my tiny studio to a one-bedroom apartment with actual furniture and a kitchen where I could cook real meals. Our breakthrough came when a regional grocery chain with 50 locations adopted our customer management system. Their public testimonial about increased efficiency and sales brought attention from other mid-sized businesses. Suddenly, my calendar filled with meetings and demos. I hired 3 more people and moved to a larger office space. With this first taste of stability, I thought about reconnecting with my family. That Christmas, for the first time since leaving home, I sent thoughtful gifts: a leather portfolio for my father, a cashmere sweater for my mother, and a spa package for Ashley, who was now working at a prestigious law firm. I included a card with my phone number and address, hoping they might reach out. My mother called on Christmas Day, thanking me briefly for the gifts before launching into news about Ashley's recent promotion and how they'd spent Christmas Eve at her in-laws' estate. When I mentioned TechSolve's recent success with the grocery, "Chain client," my mother said. "That's nice, dear," before asking if I'd be sending a gift for Ashley's birthday in February. Despite the disappointment, I continued building my company. At 26, TechSolve had 20 employees and a growing reputation for innovative solutions. Tech Innovator magazine featured me in their Rising Stars Under 30 issue with a full-page photo and article about my journey. I sent a copy to my parents, highlighting the article with a sticky note, secretly hoping this tangible proof of my success might finally earn their recognition. My father called 3 days later. "We got the magazine," he said without preamble. "Your mother and I were wondering if you'd heard Ashley's news. She's pregnant. We're going to be grandparents in July." The call lasted 8 minutes. My feature in the magazine wasn't mentioned again. I sat in my office after hanging up, staring at the framed cover on my wall, reminding myself that external validation wouldn't heal internal wounds. By 28, TechSolve occupied an entire floor in a downtown Chicago office building. We had 50 employees, clients across the country, and a reputation for excellent service. I had purchased my first home, a loft in a converted warehouse with exposed brick walls and large windows overlooking the city. For the first time in my life, I felt truly successful by any measure. When a larger tech company offered to acquire TechSolve for $12 million, I declined. The business wasn't just my livelihood. It was proof of my worth, built without family connections, college credentials, or parental support. I wasn't ready to give up control of something I'd created from nothing. Industry awards followed. TechSolve's customer retention rate was among the highest in our sector. Our innovative approaches to data security caught the attention of major players. I was invited to speak at conferences and contribute to industry publications. The little girl whose parents converted her bedroom into a trophy room for her sister had become a respected voice in technology entrepreneurship. After nearly 10 years of minimal contact, my phone displayed my mother's number 1 Tuesday afternoon. I almost didn't answer, anticipating another brief call about Ashley's accomplishments. Something made me pick up anyway. "Emma," my mother's voice sounded different, warmer, almost hesitant. "How are you, sweetheart?" The endearment caught me off guard. She hadn't called me that since I was very young. "I'm fine, Mum. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. Your father and I were just talking about you. We saw that article about TechSolve in Business Weekly. The company sounds like it's doing wonderfully." I sat down, confused by her interest. "Yes, we're doing well." "We're so proud of you," she continued. "We always knew you were smart." The conversation lasted 30 minutes, the longest we'd spoken in years. She asked questions about my company, my life in Chicago, even my apartment. Before hanging up, she suggested I come home for dinner the following month, when I'd be in Boston for a conference. "Your father and I would love to see you," she said. "It's been too long." The invitation left me stunned but cautiously hopeful. Perhaps time had changed their perspective. Perhaps seeing my success from afar had made them reconsider their dismissal of my potential. I agreed to dinner, marking the date in my calendar with both anticipation and anxiety. In the weeks before the Boston trip, my parents called several more times. My father asked about investment strategies for retirement. My mother wanted to know if I'd be interested in looking at family photo albums during my visit. These conversations felt surreal after years of indifference. The night of the dinner, I pulled up to my childhood home feeling like a visitor. My mother opened the door and actually hugged me. My father shook my hand with an approving nod. Over. Dinner, they asked detailed questions about TechSolve, our client base, our growth trajectory, our profit margins. I answered cautiously but fully, basking in their unexpected interest. What's the company valued at these days? My father asked as my mother served dessert. Last valuation put us around 30 million, I answered, feeling a small surge of pride at their impressed expressions. And you own it outright? He continued. No major investors? I've maintained majority ownership. I have some minor investors, but I control the company. My mother reached across the table to squeeze my hand. We always knew you were special, Emma. Different from Ashley, but special in your own way. I almost believed her. After dinner, my father brought out a small box. We saved some things from your childhood, he said, opening it to reveal old report cards and drawings. We always kept these. For the first time since leaving home, I felt a flicker of connection to my parents. When I hugged them goodbye, my mother held on longer than usual. We should talk more often, she said. Family is everything. 2 weeks after returning to Chicago, I received a certified letter from a Boston law firm. My assistant placed it on my desk with other mail, and I opened it without suspicion. The legal language took a moment to process, but the essence became horrifyingly clear. My parents were suing me for a portion of TechSolve. Their claim stated they had invested significantly in my early education and technical development, and deserved compensation now that these investments had yielded returns. They claimed the computer my grandfather had given me was actually purchased with their money. They claimed their emotional support throughout my youth had been instrumental to my success. They demanded 15% ownership of TechSolve as fair compensation for their contribution to my success. I read the letter 3 times, each reading more painful than the last. The dinner, the sudden interest in my business, the questions about valuation and ownership. It had all been groundwork for this lawsuit. The family reconnection I'd cautiously hoped for was nothing but a calculated attempt to extract value from me. That evening, my phone rang with Ashley's number. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year. Emma, I know you've received the letter, she began without greeting. I think you should consider the request. Mum and Dad supported us both growing up, and now they're struggling with retirement planning. Struggling? I repeated incredulously. Dad was a senior accountant. They own their house outright. Things aren't always as they seem, she continued. Besides, I'm going through an expensive divorce, and Daniel isn't paying child support consistently. The family could really use your help. The truth crystallized painfully. This wasn't just my parents. It was a coordinated family effort to access my hard-earned success. After hanging up, I sat alone in my office long after everyone else had gone home. For the first time since those early days in Chicago, I cried, not from insecurity or loneliness, but from the searing pain of ultimate betrayal by the people who should have protected me most. The following morning, I called Jennifer Zhao, one of Chicago's top business attorneys. Her reputation for fierce protection of entrepreneurs preceded her. When I forwarded her the lawsuit documents, she requested an immediate meeting. This is opportunistic at best, predatory at worst, Jennifer said, scanning the claims. But family lawsuits get messy. We need to prepare for both legal and personal fallout. Jennifer's team began building our defense, requesting documentation of my relationship with my parents throughout my life. I provided what little I had, the note I'd left when moving out, bank statements showing no financial support from them after high school, old emails showing their disinterest in my career. During discovery, Jennifer obtained text messages between my parents from the months before the lawsuit. The messages revealed their calculated plan. Emma's company is worth millions now. We raised her. We deserve some of that success. Another message from my mother to my father read, "If we show interest in her life, she'll lower her guard. She always wanted our approval." Reading their words destroyed any lingering hope of reconciliation. Their brief re-entry into my life had been entirely strategic, designed to strengthen their legal claim of ongoing family involvement. The dinner, the saved childhood mementos, the hugs, all performances for a future judge. The lawsuit consumed my thoughts and drained my energy. I began making mistakes at work, missing important client calls, overlooking errors in contracts, snapping at employees. My leadership team noticed, but I couldn't bring myself to explain that my own parents were trying to claim credit for a success they'd actively discouraged. Sleep became impossible. I'd lie awake replaying childhood memories, re-examining them, through this new lens of calculated manipulation. Had anything in my relationship with my parents been genuine? The question haunted me through sleepless nights and distracted days. My executive team stepped up remarkably. My COO Marcus took over client meetings I couldn't focus on. My CMO Priya handled press inquiries about the unusual lawsuit after a technology blog broke the story. My assistant Rachel rearranged my schedule to accommodate emergency therapy sessions I finally admitted I needed. Sophia, my first mentor and now close friend, came to my apartment one Sunday when I hadn't answered calls for 2 days. She found me surrounded by old photographs and unopened mail. "Your parents did this, not you," she said firmly, opening my curtains to let in sunlight. "And this company isn't just yours anymore. 50 people depend on TechSolve for their livelihoods. You built something larger than this lawsuit." Her words pulled me back from the edge of complete breakdown. The next morning I showered, put on a suit and returned to the office with renewed determination. My parents might try to take credit for my success, but they couldn't take away what I'd built unless I allowed them to. As the court date approached, a prominent tech blog published an article questioning my character based on my parents' claims. They quoted court documents where my parents described me as calculating and cold since childhood, and unwilling to acknowledge their crucial role in her development. The article suggested I was another tech founder who'd climbed to success by stepping on others. The morning of the initial hearing, I vomited twice from anxiety. Jennifer found me in the courthouse bathroom, shaking. "Remember who you are," she said, helping me fix my suit jacket. "You're the woman who built a $30 million company from nothing. You've faced worse than a courtroom." Walking into the courtroom and seeing my parents sitting with their attorney felt surreal. They looked smaller than I remembered, older, but also somehow exactly the same. My mother wore the pearl necklace she saved for important occasions. My father had the same stern expression he'd worn throughout my childhood. They didn't look like villains, just ordinary people who had made the extraordinary decision to sue their own daughter. Their attorney painted me as an ungrateful child who had benefited from their years of sacrifice, only to abandon them when success came. My attorney methodically dismantled this narrative, presenting evidence of my self-funded education, early independence, and their years of minimal contact. When I took the stand, the judge asked why I hadn't maintained closer contact with my family. "Your Honour," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "When I was 16, my parents converted my bedroom into a trophy room for my sister while I was away at a coding camp. When I returned, my belongings were in boxes in the basement. When I was 17, they told me I wasn't college material and used my college fund for my sister's law school. I left home at 18 and built my company without a single dollar or word of encouragement from them. This lawsuit is the most attention they've ever paid to my career." Something shifted in the courtroom after my testimony. The judge's questions to my parents became more pointed. Their claims of emotional and financial investment in my success crumbled under scrutiny. On the witness stand, I realized I no longer feared my parents' disapproval. The little girl, desperate for their attention, had grown into a woman who no longer needed their validation. Whatever the outcome of this lawsuit, I had already won the more important battle: freedom from seeking approval I would never receive. After 3 grueling days in court, the judge delivered his ruling. The plaintiffs have failed to demonstrate any substantial financial or business contribution to the defendant's company. This appears to be an opportunistic attempt to claim credit for the defendant's independent success. The case is dismissed with prejudice. Relief flooded through me, but it wasn't the pure victory I might have imagined. Legal vindication couldn't heal the deeper wound, the final confirmation that my parents viewed me primarily as a potential source of income rather than a daughter to be proud of. As I gathered my belongings, my parents approached with their attorney. My father cleared his throat. "Emma, this doesn't have to be the end of our relationship. We're still family." I looked at them clearly, perhaps for the first time. Family doesn't sue family for succeeding. I don't think we want the same things from a relationship. "You're being dramatic," my mother said, her voice taking on the familiar, dismissive tone of my childhood. "We just wanted what was fair after raising you." "Fair would have been supporting my dreams the way you supported Ashley's," I replied quietly. "Fair would have been not turning my bedroom into a shrine for her while I was still living at home. Fair would have been seeing me for who I was instead of who I wasn't." I walked away, understanding that the courthouse wasn't just the end of their lawsuit, but the end of my hope for the family I'd always wanted. Some relationships couldn't be repaired because the foundation had never been solid to begin with. A week later, Ashley called and asked to meet for coffee during my next trip to Boston. I agreed with hesitation, unsure of her motives after her support of our parents' lawsuit. We met at a quiet cafe near her office. "I owe you an apology," she said after we ordered, surprising me. "I've been thinking about our childhood since the lawsuit. I didn't realize until the hearing how differently they treated us. You didn't notice that they converted my bedroom into your trophy room." I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Ashley looked down. "I noticed, but I thought you were okay with it. Mum and Dad always said you didn't care about things." "Like I did. They said you preferred the basement because it gave you privacy." "And you believed that?" "I believed everything they told me," she admitted, "including that you abandoned the family because you were selfish. It wasn't until I heard your testimony that I realized how much of our childhood was rewritten to cast you as the problem." Her apology felt genuine, but decades of damage couldn't be undone in one coffee meeting. I told her I needed time. We agreed to occasional phone calls, a tentative bridge that might or might not bear weight over time. Returning to Chicago, I threw myself into rebuilding what the lawsuit had threatened. TechSolve had weathered the storm, but the public scrutiny had taken a toll on our reputation. I addressed it directly, giving an interview to the same tech blog that had questioned my character, sharing my journey from basement bedroom to industry leader. The experience inspired me to create a scholarship program for young entrepreneurs from difficult backgrounds. The first recipient was a 19-year-old from Detroit who had been coding since age 11 and was living in her car while building an app. Personal healing came more slowly. I started therapy, unpacking years of emotional neglect and its impact on my relationships. I realized I kept people at arm's length, afraid to depend on anyone who might eventually reject me as my parents had. I worked on allowing vulnerability back into my life, starting with my closest friends at work. 6 months after the lawsuit, I met David at a charity event. He was an architectural engineer who asked questions and actually listened to the answers. On our third date, I told him about my family and the lawsuit. Instead of offering platitudes, he said, "They missed out on knowing an incredible woman. That's their loss, not yours." The 1-year anniversary of the court victory arrived on the same day TechSolve was named one of the top women-led companies in the country. My team surprised me with a celebration that brought me to tears, not from sadness, but from the realization that I had built a family of choice that valued me exactly as I was. That night, I wrote in my journal something my therapist had suggested, a letter to my younger self. "Dear little Emma," it began, "one day you'll build something amazing, not because of your family, but despite them. Your worth isn't determined by those who couldn't see it. The people who matter will find you, and they'll see you completely. I've learned that sometimes losing a toxic family makes room for the life and connections you truly deserve. The family that matters isn't always the one you're born into, but the one that sees your value without needing to profit from it. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who only showed interest when you had something they wanted? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and self-discovery. Remember, sometimes the family we choose becomes more important than the family we're born into. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the strength to create boundaries that protect your peace.